أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. اللهم لك الحمد كما تحب وترضى، لك الحمد قبل الرضا ولك الحمد بعد الرضا ولك الحمد أبدا أبدا. نحمده تعالى حمدا يليق بجماله ويليق بجلاله، ونصلي ونسلم على حبيبنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، الرحمة المهداة ونعمة المسداة والسراج المنير. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وأنعم على معلم الناس الخير. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم يا معلم داود علمنا، ويا مفهم سليمان فهمنا. اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم لا فهم لنا إلا ما أنت فهمتنا إنك أنت الجواد الكريم. أما بعد, Alhamdulillah for this beautiful gathering today. Jazakumullah khair for the kind invitation. Today we'll talk a little bit about family. We'll talk a little bit about the psychology of families, about conflicts that happen in families, and about how to try to resolve these conflicts. It is really imperative and important for us to understand the underpinnings of these conflicts, because not all family conflicts are the same, and different conflicts are based in different reasons. So for us to be able to decipher these difficulties in families, we have to pay a closer look at family structure and what happens in families. One of the biggest things that we start talking about when we talk about families is talk about marriage, because marriage is the foundation for the formation of any family. And depending on where you came from and what culture you adopted and what culture you thrived in, you probably derived the meaning of marriage from that culture you were in. Because marriage for different families and different cultures can mean different things. In general, scholars describe two different kinds of cultures. And if I ever start talking too technical, just stop me and say, hold on, you're getting too technical. Just let me know, please, okay? So scholars divide cultures in a very simplistic way into two different kinds of cultures. There's what we call the individualistic culture and what we call the collectivist culture. What does that mean? A collectivist culture is a culture where family has a lot to say about what each individual in the family would do or behave or choose. A classical example of that is traditional family arranged marriages. The traditional way it happens is a man wants to get married. The man sends the family, usually the mom. They go, they check out a nice, practicing girl. They like her, they come back, they say, oh, we like this girl for you, she's from a good family, I think you would like her. He would go, and if he likes the girl from one or two sessions, they decide that this is a good match, we're going to get married. This concept is clearly very different than the model that we have here, living in the West, for example. Now, this is not to say that there is one correct model and one wrong model. It's not that we're talking about. Both models are perfectly functional as long as people are able to navigate these different systems. So that's an example of a collectivist culture. But there is also something that we call an individualistic culture, where the person in the family does not really pay a lot of tributes to what the family wants. That individual, that person, they navigate their system on their own, they find for themselves what they like, and then when they made a decision about their lives, they tell their families. They say, oh, I met that person, we think we're getting along really well, and I think I want you to meet them. And then the family meets that person, and then the family says, all right, bismillah, you go for it. And then things happen after that. It is tricky to talk about these things when we talk about what is Islamic, what is not Islamic. Because, quite frankly, both models can actually be very Islamic. Both models can be very Islamic. Being in the collectivist culture, where the traditions dominate, where the family has to say that I like that person, I don't like that person, Or an individualistic culture, it can also be very Islamic. You know, that person might make the other person in an open space, in a safe space, without them mingling, without having to be doing something which is haram, sometimes supervised by the family, where that person gets to meet the other frequently, they get to talk together, and then based on what they talk about and how they perceive the other, they decide if we can move forward or not move forward. These two different kinds of cultures we have to be aware of, especially, and that's really important, if you migrate with your family from a collectivist culture towards a more individualistic culture. And that can be a source of stress for families. And I think all of you have examples in mind that you can think about how one who came from a more conservative, more collectivist culture, when moving to a rather open, more individualistic culture, how that can add some stress to the family. The reason is, the kids growing in a new culture, in a more open, individualistic culture, they are comparing themselves with others. They're looking at what's going on around them in the world. And they're asking questions. Why are we like that? Why are we different? How come my friend gets to enjoy more liberty, more freedom, more choice, and my options and my choices and my freedoms are limited with what the family wants? Can you think of examples like that? I think all of us can relate to these examples. So what is the way out? How do we think about these problems? How do we approach these problems? Do we think individualistic versus collectivist? Do we think Islamic versus un-Islamic? Do we think West versus East? How do we think about these important issues, and how do we approach these problems? That's what we're talking about today, inshallah. One very important concept that we can address when we talk about these struggles is to understand how does the self gets formed. Each one of us grew in a certain environment that caused their self-development. Think about your youth. Think about when you were a kid. Think about your family. Think about the times when you wanted to do something and then the family said no. And you had to say, okay, no means no, I guess I'm not going to do it. Think about the times where you actually negotiated, where they said no, but you actually stood up for yourself and you said, well, no, but why? And that's irrelevant. If you lived in a collectivist culture, individualistic culture, these moments have happened in the past for each one of us. When you stood up for yourself, when you said no, but why, let me know why, you have stepped a step forward in what we call the process of differentiation. You as a person, as an individual, have become more differentiated, which means you have adopted a set of values for yourself that are more solid, thus forming what we call the solid self, or the basic self. That part of your personality that is very stable, that really narrates your story and tells who you are as a person in your core. Who are you as a person? And these moments can actually be very memorable in your memory. You can actually think about those times in your life where you've become more independent. Those times in your life where you've become more self-reliable. Those moments of your life where you learn to take initiative. Those moments of your life where you stood up for yourself, and since that day, you kind of grew as a person. All of us can think about those examples. Now imagine with me growing as a child, as a teenager, where every time you were told no, you just agreed to that no. Your life becomes totally revolving around what the family wants. Everything the family wants, you just say okay. Everything that they say you can do, you go ahead and do it. So this relatively obedient form of development, this relatively fluid sense of differentiation can at times be very challenging. And people who've had such development can be vulnerable, especially if they grow up in Western cultures. I'll give you an example. So if we have a child, we have a teenager, who learned to cope all the time by saying yes to the parents, by abiding by the rules of the family all the time. I'm not talking about religious rules here, I'm not talking about halal or haram, let's not confuse terms here. I'm talking about daily choices that they want to make for themselves. Do I buy this or that from this store or that store? Do I go hang out with that friend or this friend? Am I allowed to go to the masjid for al-qiyam or not go for al-qiyam? Am I to go to that major? That's the biggest one, right? Or this major in college? Does my family dictate what do I do in life, or do I dictate what I do in life? People who never really stood up for themselves, never really had the chance to face the healthy anxiety of being able to stand up for yourself, can create what we can call a pseudo-self, a rather fused self, a not so differentiated self that is only a part of the family. So these people, when you talk to them, they really might feel that they lack their core as a self. They might lack the set of values that makes them who they are as a person. One problem with that is, when they go out to the outside world, when they have no family, they are faced with the dreadful question of, who am I? What kind of things are important for me? What kind of things are less important for me? Who am I as a person? And they might think to themselves, I really never fought the fight or struggled the struggle, never stood up for myself to establish who I am really at the core. I never had a conflict with my parents, after which I actually chose for myself. After which I said, oh, this is me, and I really have to have this because it's important for me. Some people look at conflicts in families in a negative way. They think, oh, conflicts are bad. But they're not always like that. If you stand up for yourself in front of your parents as an adolescent, as a teenager, as a child, and very eloquently describe what you want, even though that's not what the parents want, but being able to stand for yourself and say, no, I want this for myself. I think it's healthy, I think it's good, it's not haram, why are you saying no? This sense of anxiety and stress is actually healthy for development. This actually builds the self. This actually helps create the hard core of the self, the person, the deep inside set of values that make you who you are as a person. I think so far I was trying to set the foundation for an important concept. And I'll try to summarize what I said earlier before. That regardless where you are, if you are in a collectivist culture where the family dictates what you have to do, or if you are in individualistic culture where you choose for yourself and the family has less space in your life, whatever you come from, there has to be some element of anxiety and confrontation between the kids and the parents, so that the kids, the teenagers, will be able to stand up for themselves and create the true self, and create the hardcore self, the set of values that make us who we are. The alternative to that is to create what we call the pseudo-self, or the not so formed, so differentiated self, where you actually might go out to the world and you might actually adopt any kind of value that is more in strength, that is more in number, that is more in whatever. This is especially important when we think about things like extremism, for example. Extremism in all its forms. There are extremists who are actually crazy fanatics, and there are extremists who actually are in the opposite direction, who let loose of the religion and they just let go of their identity. And you can trace both of those kinds sometimes to the development. Both of these might actually have struggled in their development with the true self. Both of those types might have struggled by having been completely fused with their family structure. Never had the chance to have the stress and the anxiety of confronting the parents and making their own choices. Always obedient, always part of what's going on around them, always fused with their parents' choices. So now when they face the world, when they leave their homes, they have not developed a set of skills that they need to make up their mind. There was always an ectopic mind. There was always a CPU, so to speak, outside their bodies, who was telling them what to do. I want to do something, what does mom want? What does dad want? What does the family want? Sometimes what does aunt want? If the aunt is like an older in the family. What does my uncle want? If the uncle is the eldest in the family. What do the grandparents want? Let me do what they want, right? Instead of developing my own set of skills to decide what I want for myself as a person. Now mind you, if you live in a collectivist culture, that's less of a problem. Because the whole environment is like that. The whole structure of the system is like that. You won't struggle as much. But now we're here, right now. Now we're living in the West, living in the US right now, which is relatively a more individualistic culture, where the person has to say for themselves what they want for themselves. And hence, it becomes really imperative that we help kids and teenagers to choose for themselves, to help them adopt a set of skills and adapt a set of skills that would help them form this core of the self, that would help them get differentiated as people, that would help them be stronger in how they perceive themselves and what kind of things are important for them, what kind of things are not important for them. I like to think about that the way I think about a bottle of water in the fridge or Jello with no gelatin. That's how I like to think about that. So when you try to freeze Jello or a bottle of water, you start developing a solid core, right? It becomes to harden a little bit, right? And then if you have had like a particle in the middle of the water, you will start forming a solid core. And that solid core starts getting bigger, and then the rest of the thing gets solidified after that, right? That's how the Jello forms, right? I like the Jello because it's more, it gives a better example. Now imagine what I talked about the differentiation of the person, becoming a stronger person in knowing oneself, and accomplishing this inner structure of the self through some conflict and anxiety, which is very healthy. Imagine that as the core of the bottle, or the core of the Jello. It's really important so that the final product is solid. And the more mercuric and the more liquidy the product is, which in our example means that the family is more dominant, it will become very difficult to develop a crystallized body, a crystallized self, a crystallized personality structure. I think that example kind of a little bit gives it a clearer sense of what we're talking about here. When we live in an individualistic culture, we would like to see a solid, crystallized self. We want to see a person who's able to tell, oh, this is really important for me. I won't give these things away. I'll give you a better example yet. All of us have seen people in our lives who change all of a sudden, and in a scary way. People who were grown up as, practicing Muslims since they were little kids, went to the mosque, went to the masjid, went to Islamic school, did the right thing, and then once they hit 18 and leave home and go to college, this structure collapses. And we wonder what happened. What happened? What on earth happened? How did that happen to that person? What went wrong? We can't really, it's not a science, you can't pin it down to the details of it, but many times and oftentimes, if you look at the family structure, many times these people have had dominant family structures, where that person could never really negotiate. That person was completely fused with their families, with their parents, and they were not really able to discuss or negotiate for themselves what they really want for themselves. So they always became attuned to the emotional needs of the parents. Oh, mom, I want to do this. Mom starts crying. You can't do this to us. You can't do it to the family. But can we talk about that? No, we can't talk about that. You're just hurting me right now. Go to your room. So they become attuned not to the logic of things, not to the objective matter of things, but to how my mom feels, how my dad feels about things. And that's not good for development, especially in an open, individualistic culture. People really have to develop their own set of skills to negotiate what is important for them and what is not. And in that dominant family structure, teenagers learn that I am easily influenced by other people's feelings. People can dictate how I behave in life based on their feelings, and they become very sensitive to the feelings, very sensitive to other people's feelings. The way they were sensitive to their mom or their dad, that becomes their compass for deciding what to do in life. So So if after they're leaving home, they go to college, they fall in love with someone who is not practicing, feelings, okay, feelings, navigating, the compass is navigating now the feelings, I go with the feelings now, not the objective facts, not the skill set that I have, the feelings navigate me, right? Or they hang out with the wrong crowd, buddies, you know, feelings, also feelings, they guide them where to go in life, their compass is feelings now, right? They can collapse. Why is that? Because the groundwork was not done at home. The groundwork was not established at home. Hence, as parents, as educators, we really have to invest in those conflicts that happen at home. Because those conflicts, those anxieties, those stressors of opposite opinions between children and parents are actually a beautiful place for growth. A beautiful place for these kids and teenagers to blossom. A great chance to have discussions about life. A great lab to experiment with what is important for me and what is not important for me. I guess I'm trying to make a point here that if you have a child, if you have a teenager, if you're a teenager yourself, or a child yourself, it's always important to negotiate and stand up for yourself. And although there are red zones where people cannot really negotiate, like the halal, for example, in our religion, there are spaces where we can make use of these differences for growth and for more crystallization of that hard core of the self. Now today's talk is about what we call the title of the talk today, living away at home. What does that mean? It means that oftentimes the families have become broken. Oftentimes, especially we're talking about living here in the West, in the US, many times the families have become broken. Now, it is important to define what does that mean, broken family. What does that mean to have a broken family? Especially when we have teenagers at home. Because teenagers have this propensity to kind of separate a little bit. Because they're growing up, they're becoming older, they look bigger, they think in a more abstract way now as they become teenagers. And they want to differentiate and separate and individualize. They want to become who they are. They want to become adults. And that's very healthy, by the way. That's one of the milestones of becoming an adult, becoming a teenager, where you think for yourself, you decide for yourself, you grow this capacity to think about life, about abstract things. That's great, that's very healthy. But when does it become a problem? It becomes a problem when that teenager, when that person becomes estranged from the family. And estranged means that communications have failed. That teenager has tried to become a part of the family, a meaningful part of the family, but for some reason that stopped happening. It's either because trust was lost, it's either because the parents are not talking to them, or it's because they made poor choices and they were punished for these poor choices with very harsh and strict punishments, where they felt that they no longer belonged to this family. They no longer, were part of this whole, that important whole. So there's a continuum, as you realize now, and I'm trying to always summarize to make things clear in our heads. There is a complete enmeshment, where that person is completely fused with their family. It's like a revelation. If mom cries a little bit, dad, is sad about something, there's no conflict. We can't afford conflict. We can't afford anxiety. I'm on the completely obedient side. That fusion, we said, might not always be healthy. And there is the healthy differentiation, individuation, and separation, where the teenager wants to become a separate self, wants to differentiate on their own. They want to collect their set of beliefs. They want to be an individual, per se, with some anxiety and some stress. But if that is not managed well, what happens is the opposite extreme, which is what? Estrangement. Feeling that I can't fit in this family. I can't be part of this family. This family is not able to accommodate me. This family does not want me to be part of it. Now these things happen a lot. And I'm sure all of us can think about examples where the communication has failed in the family, where the teenager or the child feels separate. But also, most importantly, this can happen to parents as well. Parents can feel estranged from their kids. Parents can feel estranged from their own children, their own teenagers. That can be a big problem for parents as well. And why is that? Because parents, especially immigrant families, they come in with a set of belief in their heads. They come in and they have a romanticized image about how they want the children to be. They come and they say, I'm going to bring up my kid the way my parents brought me up. I want that person to be this and this and this and that. And they go to the nitties and gritties of how they want the children to be. And that's a problem. Why is that? Because your child is not you. You were born in a different environment, different culture. Your child is in a different family, a different culture, a different country. Everything is different. So it's not rational to expect that your child will grow up like you exactly. That does not happen. It won't happen. Let me tell you that clearly. It won't happen. If you still have that in mind, please change your mind a little bit. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's not healthy for that to happen even. They have to have their own space to grow. They will have to have their own life experiences that will make them who they are as people, as individuals. That's really important. And again, please, I'm not talking about halal and haram here. I'm not talking about, oh, they want to date, let them go date. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about things within the realm of al-halal, of our religion. And that's very clear, inshallah, from my talk, from my speech. So that's a problem. What happens is, often parents get estranged, and they often recline. They just take a few steps back, and they just take a step on the side, and they no longer become part of their family's life, of their kids' life. And that happens a lot to men, more to men than women. Men tend to be busy with their jobs. They go out, they seek provision for their family, and then they come back home late, and they're exhausted, they're tired. And the jobs, people work longer hours here, and they just have no time. They have no bandwidth. They have no energy to struggle with the struggles of the families. And if their son is a teenager, they have their trouble, they have their problems. The easiest way to manage these problems is to dominate. Is to say, we, the royal we say so, and you have to apply and to abide. If you don't like it, this is my home. I am paying you for school. So we use this language to kind of suppress the need, to suppress what this person wants, creating this fusion that we talked about, or that estrangement, which we don't want. And where the negotiation is where we have to go, and we have to stay in that middle ground. So that estrangement, you see in families in different shapes. You see, you can imagine snapshots of a man, going back at home to home from work and just watching TV all night. Not playing with the kids, not hanging out. For the Arabs in Jazeera, just go back home, eat, have a nap, then wake up, watch the Jazeera all night, right? Watch movies, right? And what about the kids? Who's talking to the kids? Who's talking to the teenagers? You're the dad. Who are you? You have a role in this family, right? Moms tend to have the problem, but less than men in general. So, where are you in the lives of your kids as a parent? That's important. Why is that? From an Islamic standpoint, the Prophet ﷺ says in the hadith, كَفَى الْمَرْءِ إِثْمًا أَنْ يُضَيَّعَ مَنْ يَعُولُ. It is so much sinful of a person to abandon those who are dependents on him. And abandonment could be financial, or could be psychological, or could be emotional. That form of abandonment, that form of neglect, is not often talked about. And we have to talk about that. And we have to remind ourselves that as parents, it's a faridah, it's an obligation to be active parts of the lives of the children. We have to be an active participant in their choice making. We have to go through the motions of this stress and anxiety of the negotiation process. We have to go through this healthy, stressful anxiety of helping them differentiate in a healthy way. We cannot recline and just take a passive role, and we cannot just use the domination and dominate and suppress who they are as people. Now, why is this important? What happens to people who are not very active in their kids' lives. What happens to these children? What happens to these youth? They will look for models elsewhere. They will try to find a model for themselves. Or they will learn from their own baggage. They will go out into life and they will explore on their own, and they will, in an unguided way, they will try to find answers for themselves. And that can be healthy sometimes, because they have like first-hand experience. They can go out and they can, experience life, and they can come back with answers. But sometimes things go wrong, and that's where the family role is important. And if that is absent, people can get in trouble if that happens to them. So, for us to have a healthy differentiation, for us to have a healthy growth in a family, what kind of differentiation would we need to prevent estrangement? What kind of self-development? For a teenager, for a person to separate and individuate in a healthy way, this has to involve an active participation of the parents and not a passive, as we said, participation. This process has also to be guided and not enforced with necessity. So an example with that, I couldn't stand up for myself in school. There were bullies in school. I couldn't stand up for myself. So instead of making good choices, I made poor choices. I had to ally myself with another bully to face that bully. I had to hang out with the wrong crowd because they got my back. Right? I made poor choices. So there might be some growth from that experience, but it's not guided. This is not guided. It was dictated by necessity. I had to do something. I had to protect myself. And also, it has to be informed. What does that mean? It means that the parent has to pick with their teenager choices that are relevant to that teenager. Choices that are specific for that person in the family. What does that mean? It means that I actually have to know my child. I actually have to know about their emotional life. I actually have to know who they are as people. Are they sensitive? Are they rough? Are they tough? Are they easily insulted? Are they go-getters? Are they late bloomers? Are they more on the reserved side and they need a lot of support? That's important. That you have to know about your child, because if you don't, you will give random advice that does not make any sense, that will get them in more trouble. So if your child is not very aggressive and assertive, and they're kind of late bloomers, they're shy, a lot of successful people are like that, a lot of brilliant people are like that, that's not a problem, that's okay. But if you say, son, stand up for yourself, stand your ground, if somebody hits you, hit them back. If you say that to your child, and they're kind of not that aggressive, they will get in trouble. You will get in trouble. Everyone's going to get in trouble. So what that means is that I have to be attuned to the emotional life of my child. I have to be curious enough about their lives, about who they are as people, not about how I want them to be as people. That's really important. I need to know who they are, not how I want them to be, because that's not fair. That's not fair that you ignore who they are as people, as persons, and just dictate how you want them to be. That's not fair. And to do that, to be attuned to the emotional life of a child and a teenager, you have to have established a line of communication that was there from early on in life. What does that mean? I'll give you an example. A lot of parents, a lot of fathers, a lot of mothers, the chain of communication is cut in life early on, and it's only revolving about the basic needs. The food, the shelter, the warmth, the cleanliness, the clothes, the homework. But they're not attuned to the emotional lives of their kids, especially with bigger families. That can be a big problem. And then suddenly puberty hits, and then they download all that immense amount of information about halal, haram, dating, puberty, boyfriend, girlfriend, all that jazz. And then these kids get overwhelmed. I don't understand what's going on. What is so dangerous about this thing? That my parent changed their style of communication. We haven't talked in years about my life, my personal life, about my feelings. And now suddenly, they scared me. They talk about all these things at once what is so important about that? And why is it so scary the way they talk to me about that? So that can be very scary. So we have to keep the lines of communication from early on in life. And we have to be attuned to their emotional lives. We have to ask, how are you feeling today? How was school? What did you like? What did you not like? Who's your best friend? What do you like about that best friend? What do you like about that friend that you don't like that much? Do you like, if she's a girl, do you like any guys in the class? If it's a boy, do you like any girls in the class? Because that's normal, that's natural. If you don't ask about it, it doesn't mean that it's not happening. Alright? Let's not hide behind our fingers, right? If you're not asking about it, you're not like safe and immune. It's not going to happen. I didn't ask about it. You know, my kids are very good kids. Nothing of that sort will happen. This is a human nature. So we have to be aware that this is a human nature. And we have to be able to be there with them when they go through these feelings so we can help them process these feelings. Otherwise, they will get a misinformation when they hit puberty that having a feeling of love is haram. These feelings are haram. It's not haram. This is a natural propensity that Allah, with His mercy, has created in each one of us. What is haram, though, is to go out of the way, and deviate and follow one's desires and operate on those feelings in a harmful way. That's haram. But the feeling per se itself is not haram, and we have to be able to be clear about that. And there is no way to make that information cross to them if we're not attuned to their emotional lives. If we hadn't had those discussions with them before. If we were not there planting the seeds early on in their lives. And not just waiting for the leaves to come out and the fruits to come out and say, where did that fruit come from? It came from years and years of neglect to their emotional lives, to their emotional needs. So, if we recap a little bit and rethink about what we talked about, we had talked about roughly that we have, in general, in a very simplistic way, there are two very wide classifications of cultures. We have an individualistic culture, we have a collectivist culture. In the collectivist culture, the area that the individual shares with the family and the environment is bigger. So the jelly piece, the water piece of the bottle is actually bigger. And we said that's okay and healthy if that's how the environment is, and if that individual is supported with this environment. But we said that in individualistic cultures, the individual has to differentiate and to be able to form the solid, basic, hardcore self that will be able to stand up for that self and decide for themselves what is important for them, what is not important for them in life. And we said that this is an important skill set that these individuals have to learn to be able to negotiate for themselves in life and to help them become successful as adults. And we had also described that we have this continuum of the fusion where the individual has no say. We have a differentiation zone where there's negotiation, where there's discussions, stress and anxiety, which is healthy, but there's also the estrangement, where that person is, separate from the family, operating in parallels, not being part of the family. And then we said that it is important for families to accept this anxiety and to foster it. And we said that it's important as well for the parents to make use of these conflicts, because this is fertile land for differentiation. This is fertile land to get engaged in discussions, very importantly, as we said. And also, we had described that it is important that there has to be an emotional attunement to the emotional life of that child, and not to wait until puberty hits and say, oh, this is halal, this is haram, and do this and do that. Now let me conclude with an example to make things very practical. A lot of people suffer and struggle with the question of TV, right? TV or no TV, this is the question. What do we do? Do we have a TV at home? What do they watch? What can they watch? What can they not watch? Etc. So when it comes to TV, there's this concept of what we call parental mediation or mediation. So if the parent is involved in their kids' lives, they can be mediators. They can play the role of the middleman between what's happening on the TV screen and what is perceived in this child's mind about what they're seeing. So there are three general attitudes towards TV and media in general. There is, as we described earlier, there's the most passive form, which is what? Restriction. You know, no TV, everything on TV is haram. This is not our deen, this is not our religion, you know. Don't watch it, don't do it. No movies, nothing, right? What do you think happens to these teenagers? What do you think that happens to them? There'll be a schism, right? They'll at home be obedient, سمعنا وأطعنا, you know, complete fusion. But when they go home, when they go outside the home, they go visit friends, they're thirsty. They want to see what's on this TV, for heaven's sake. Why is everybody saying you can't watch TV? What's happening there, right? So they will open, they watch more TV until they get what they want from that TV. So this is not the best strategy. Needless to say, it's not the best strategy. Of course, we're not talking about haram stuff as well here. Let's be clear about that. You know, we're talking about regular TV. And we're talking about things that are, you know, not against al-Sharia. Now, a second model is co-viewing. Sitting with them while watching TV and just watching. Sort of being able to be there with them and to join that experience with them. Just being there and watching with them. Not necessarily commenting or discussing what's going on, but just watching TV with them so that you know what they're watching. In a sense, there's better than the first one, but in a sense it's also passive. Because you're not really commenting on what's going on. You're not really meaningfully commenting on what's going on with the TV watching. And then the third kind is what we call the active mediation. So the active mediation is when you sit with them and then you have a discussion about what's going on the screen. You say, oh, interesting movie you're watching. Oh, interesting. What is this movie about? You know, people are shooting. I see cops chasing these people. What's happening? And then you discuss what happens on the screen, right? And you say things like, well, I kind of like that guy in the movie. Like, he was just and he was strong and he stood up for justice, you know. He was alone, but he was able to, you know, go through this experience and he was able to emerge successfully. Sounds like when you are perseverant, when you are patient, and when you stick to the principles, you can be successful as a person. So this mediation is actually very efficient and very helpful. And studies actually have shown that parents who do mediation, active mediation, actually contribute to the psychological well-being of their children. And things, for example, happen to children who have active parents who mediate actively. Things like what? Things like communication skills become better. Things like capacity to criticize and to have your own judgment can get also better. Also a sense of being social and being able to have a bigger social connection can get better. So all these things happen to families who actually actively mediate with their children and who don't just passively sit back and say, I don't know what these kids are watching, or I don't care about what you're watching, or just watch what they're doing and not commenting and not being an active part of what they're watching. So this is an example I wanted to give to say that there are things that we can do to create those moments where you can actually have those difficult discussions. These are examples that I gave where you can actually use this fertile land of a difference of opinion, of possible conflict, to help them grow as a person, to help them differentiate and form that solid self that they will use as a tool in the future to make choices for themselves. I will stop here, inshallah, and we'll take any questions if you have any questions. Jazakumullah khair for the kind invite. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
I was listening to NPR about, I listened to it when I was driving, and one of the topics that came up was sex education. And I know there are some topics in our communities which are like just taboo. No matter how connected you are in your family with your kids, the parents just don't want to talk about certain things. In those circumstances, how do you navigate the way you just suggested in terms of not having estrangement, but not also, you know, the other extreme, but try to have that discussion, that healthy discussion, so that the kid will be able to learn it. But also I wanted you to let me know what you think about the appropriate ages to deal with those taboo subjects.
So that's a great question. The brother was asking about sex education. And he was asking about what is a good way to actually target this topic. And what is a good age to actually talk about this topic. You know, sex education is life education. And it's part of the process of the education that we want our kids to have about life in general. It's not a discussion that we only have around puberty. It's not a discussion that we have people try to get married. It's not like that. It starts early on in life. So there are two things that we have to think about when it comes to that topic, about the sex education topic. First, we need to have the channels of communication open all the time, so that when the kids have questions, they can run to us and ask us those questions. But if we don't show interest, if we have programmed our kids, every time they talk to us, mom is busy cooking and dad is busy watching TV, the kids will learn that I'm not that important really for my parents. Every time I come to ask questions, they're just busy doing other things. I might as well just not ask any questions, right? So the open channels of communication really important. That the parents feel that when my child asks a question, this is an honor for me. This is an honor that they trust me. And I have to be open to them. And I have to give attention. Attention is not just with words. You know, the Prophet ﷺ, and this is the sunnah. This is not the sunnah, is not the siwak, just the siwak and the thawb, right? And the lihya. The Prophet ﷺ, when somebody would talk to him, he would turn around and face them. He would turn around, he wouldn't like talk to them when he's paying like attention, half attention. He would turn around and face them face to face. That kind of attention. When Fatima would come into a room, he would stand up and give her his seat. He would say, sit here, Fatima. He would stand up, give her his own seat. That kind of attention we have to give to our children. So with that level of attention, they will feel that it's a safe environment for me at home to come and talk about things. So there is this very important emotional, social piece about this topic. The second part of it is the cognitive, the information. You know, what kind of information is valid for what age group? I think that sex education starts as early as like 6 or 7 years old. And the way we talk about things is we start by commenting about life. We talk about nature. We talk about flowers, you know, the pollen grains. We talk about how the flowers get fertilized. We talk about how animals, males and females, procreate. We talk about general things in life, how the biology of life happens. How do things happen in life? And then gradually build on that information. So that when you face that age where you have to talk about these things openly, you don't have to download an immense amount of information based on nothing. So, for example, at the age of 6 or 7, they learn about pollination. They can say, remember when we talked about pollination, the male and female, and how the fruit gets formed? Well, it's kind of similar also in animals, right? You can go to the zoo and you can say, oh, this is what happens in males and females. And then the kids will ask, oh, what about men and women? Is it the same for us? And you say, that's kind of actually very similar in a similar way. But we as humans, you know, Allah created us in a different way and gave us, you know, the intellect to decide when to act on those things, when not to act on those things. How to organize that in our lives, and how to be responsible people. So the discussion starts early on in life, and we have to build on these things, based on real life situations. Versus, well, puberty is hitting, all right, we will have to have this discussion, right? Sit down and have to talk to you. It doesn't work that way. That's not a healthy way of doing it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Just a quick follow-up, if you don't mind. Sex education is also taught at school at a young age as well.
Yeah.
My question is like, if it's taught at school and those thoughts or that information getting from school from the teacher, is that better to come from the teacher, or whether to come from the family, or it should come from both, or it should be coming from one place only? Because I'm sure the kid will start to feel conflicted at some point.
That's a great question. The brother was asking, you know, sex education is also discussed at school. And he's asking, is that something that we should also discuss at home, or leave it for school, or both? Because the children might get conflicted. I think it's what you said, both. And I don't think there is a conflict. I think what happens within the Muslim family is that things get contextualized. You know, they get contextualized. They might learn about things from a biological standpoint, but when we talk about these things in family, we highlight what we talk about in school, and we say this is how beautiful things happen, this is how babies happen, this is where we have families, you know, when people love each other and they get together and we have fun together as a family. So that can get contextualized within the family environment. I don't see any conflict there.
Okay.
I have a question regarding you said the fathers don't participate.
Yes.
Should we have a segregation? I mean, letting the fathers deal with the boy teenagers in certain aspects, and the moms to deal with their daughters, or I mean, sometimes it's really tricky when a father deals with his daughter teenager.
Well, that's
question.
Yeah, I understand that question. The brother was asking, do we as parents try to segregate, divide and conquer, where the dads would talk with the sons and the moms would talk with the daughters about these things? We're talking about puberty in general. In general. So he's talking about, he asked about in general, not just the topic of puberty and sex education. So the answer is it depends on the family and it depends on the kids. You know, some daughters actually feel more comfortable with their dads. It depends on the family. The take-home message and the important thing is that both mom and dad have to be emotionally available and accessible. So that the daughter feels, I want to talk to my dad about that, that is accessible. There are communication, lines that are open. The channels are open that she can access you whenever she wants. And vice versa. Mom is always accessible. This is what has to happen. Versus dividing the roles. I mean, you can do that if that's what the kids want, if that's how they're comfortable. But there always has to be an effort from both parents to keep the channels open all the time, so that they can run to whoever they want if they feel the need to.
In regard to this, in this society, what position the Muslim father should be in a regard of marriage between man and man, woman and woman? It should be very, very strictly prohibited, and he doesn't allow to his family a boy at a young age or not at a young age that like another boy, or a girl at a young age that like another girl, the way the society is open and the society where we are.
Well, that's a great question. I think this topic will probably be a whole different lecture. So I can't comment fully on this topic, but what I can tell you, which is very important, is that when kids come to us and say, I like that person or this person, to explore more and to ask more questions. And to be curious about that. Oh, how do you like them? What kind of things do you like about them? And not to threaten and intimidate the kids. Kids are very receptive. And they learn really quick. And this urban myth that little kids don't really understand that much, they're just little kids. Kids are very smart. And they can learn from just looking at your face. If they say something and you look scared, they get scared. Right? This is how sensitive they are. If you ask a question that might be a little bit inappropriate or whatever the case is, and you are uncomfortable and you look scared, they will say, oh my God, that question scared me. I'm not going to ask it again. I don't know what happened. I got scared. So you have to be comfortable, addressing their questions and being able to listen to them and not be scared, right? I mean, sometimes you have to be scared if something is really scary, but if things are just common things that kids ask, we need to be comfortable to entertain their questions. So if in a family, a boy comes to me and says, I like the other boy, let's ask more questions about that, depending on the age as well. Same for the girls. I like it. What does that mean? Oh, she's a good friend. Oh, maybe not. Oh, what happens when you see her? What happens when you shake hands? Things of that sort. And if you feel that there are things that are happening that shouldn't be happening, you can ask for more help from the community, from an expert, from a psychologist, from other people who can be helpful. I think that's a whole different discussion.
One more question.
The brother here.
من فضلك أنه كاين كثير من الآيات يقول وبالوالدين إحسانا.
نعم.
ولا تقل لهم أف ولا تنهرهم وقل لهم قولا سديدا. وكاين في بعض العائلات أنه بعد الزواج أنه لا يحبون يعني معاملة الآباء أو الأمهات داخل المنزل. يقول للزوجة أنا لا أحب أبيك أو أمي.
نعم.
هذه من جهة. وبعض الزوجات لا تحب يعني المساعدة للأم أو للأب. ما هو الحل؟
Well, the brother is asking a question about the age-old conflicts that happen between in-laws and the dads and the parents from one side and the other side of the family. And he's asking, like, what is the way out? I think whenever people get married, they start a new family. And we have to respect that. We have to respect the fact that this is a new family, a new body per se, and they have to decide for themselves a lot of things about their lives. Many times the parents try to influence these marriages. They try to dictate what they want, what they think is the best way of doing things, what they think the culture says. When we were back home, are you from Morocco?
Yes.
When we were back home in Meknes, this and that happened, and I want to see this happen to you as well. This is our culture. We cannot abandon our culture. Well, you can go back to Morocco and apply those principles, but you can't apply them here, because we live in a different culture here. And like I said earlier, we really have to differentiate between what is culture and what is Islam. I know this is cliche, but this is very true. This is very true. That oftentimes we worship the culture, and it becomes so rigid that we can't really negotiate the culture even. So we have to get this out of the way. If we feel that the parents are getting too involved with their kids' lives, dictating everything about their lives, that's not fair. For this married couple, it's not fair. But it's a problem when when one of the couples is actually being disrespectful or insulting to the parents. That's bad. And we have to talk about these things. I know that in many cultures we like abrupt solutions, black and white. She doesn't like me, she hates me, she's not a good wife. That's a big statement. That's a huge leap. You jump from she doesn't like something about me, so she's a that happens a lot in our cultures. It happens a lot. We have to discuss, well, why do you not like this thing about my mom? Does she come here a lot? Do you not like that? Do you feel that she's taking a lot of your freedom, your space? Let's talk about it. Let's go visit mom and talk about it. Let's have her come in a time where you are comfortable. Maybe she's just crashing every time they're sitting together. She just knocks on the door and comes in. I miss you. I need my time with my husband. I need some space. Give us some space to breathe, right? And do give them some space to breathe. But if that's not the case, if the parents are being very respectful and she still has problems, that's what family therapy is for. You can seek the counsel of a family therapist who will try to bridge this gap, who will try to approximate opinions and try to reconcile. Because in our Sharia, reconciliation is one of the maqasid. It's one of the things that Sharia highly recommends. Not fighting. A lot of families are about drama. A lot of conflicts in families happen because somebody in the family likes drama. They like to see things fire up. They like action. Oh, she didn't invite me. Oh, she probably doesn't like me. Oh, what's going on? Oh, she thinks she's better than me. Oh, they infuse the drama. This is not what Islam recommends. Islam recommends, okay, there's an area of struggle. Let us reconcile. Let us try to see how we can help put off the fire. Not flame the fire and make a barbecue out of it. Let's not do that. Let's just try to calm things down and understand what's going on so we can approximate opinions. You had a question?
Yes.
Yes.
How do we tell our kids, our teenagers, this is not good for you? Because at a certain age they start to ask about sleepover, about going to the movies and so on and so forth. Especially if they have friends, they start as first grade, second grade friends, and they grow up, and then you see that little girl of your daughter way back, she was okay, but now she starts to be, maybe she has to put in earrings here, it's this kind of things. How do you tell her that she is not good for you anymore? she cannot be your friend, because you can see that she start to deviate. Do you see what I mean? How do you approach this?
Yeah. So the brother is asking, in different friendship relationships between Muslim kids and non-Muslim kids, or maybe Muslim kids as well, doesn't really matter. You find that, if you have a friend of your daughter or your son, that they're kind of taking a different path. They're deviating from what you think is the righteous path, the Islamic way of life, etc. So how do you deal with that? Well, first of all, we have to understand that friendships are really important for kids, and especially for teenagers. This is their life. These are their lives. And Abdurrahman bin Auf, the famous Sahabi, when he left Mecca, he cried. He cried. And he was asked, why are you crying? He said, because I'm leaving my friends in Mecca. That was a glorious Sahabi, a glorious companion. And one of the 10 people was promised heaven. And when leaving Mecca, he was crying for the loss of his friends. And then Allah in Surah Maryam, reveals verses that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would make lahum wudda. Right? And that verse was talking about Abdurrahman bin Auf, because he was crying when he left Mecca. So we have to acknowledge that friendships are really important for children. And that oftentimes parents don't think about that. They think, oh, she's just a friend. Oh, you can get another friend. Oh, we'll take her to the masjid and you can pick a friend. No, it's a relationship. And things need time to happen. So the first thing we have to do is join them with this emotional pain. And we have to say, this is very difficult. And let's spend some time talking about that. So we have to be emotionally attuned, and we have to say, we have to acknowledge that this is difficult. And let's sit and talk about it. And let's go through these emotions, these feelings. How can we help sort these things out? How can we help you see her in a more controlled setting? Or see him in a controlled setting? Would they want to come over? And if they did something bad, if that one of your children's friends did something bad, it does not mean they're a bad person. They're making their choices. Often people come back or change their ways in lives. If they put a ring in their nose, it's not a big deal, it's okay. And one of the famous scholars, he was like a jurist and he was a scientist. He had an earring in his ear, And when he came to the masjid, he had a name, in Arabic the translation of that would be the man with the earring, the man with the earring. That was okay in the culture back then. So let's not make a big thing out of these things. But things that are bigger, for example, like doing drugs or like dating random people and going out, things like that, dangerous. We will have to discuss that with the kids. How do we keep this friendship going without it affecting your way of life, which is important for you? Now that being said, implies that previously we've had some work done with the kids so that our way of life is important for them. So that they feel that my family, belonging to my family, is actually really important for me. And that I want to keep that tie with my family. And it's not only about, like we said, emotions and feelings that are taking me anywhere. Because of that friendship, I can abandon my family. No, there's actually a solid foundation in my family where I feel warm, I feel comfortable, I feel loved. I feel that my needs are satisfied, my emotional needs are satisfied. If that were the case, that kid would want to be with the family and would trust the family's wisdom. And they will say, I like that person, can we come over, can they come over once a week to play with me or to hang out in a controlled setting, can we do that please? And then you have to sort things out.
Actually, last question, okay.
The brother has a question. Yeah.
It's a quick question. Are you pro or against parents spying on their kids, on their teenagers?
That's a good question.
So the brother is asking, are you pro or against spying on their teenagers in general? I'm against spying in general, regardless if it's on a teenager or not a teenager. But it depends what you mean by spying, okay? You would want to wean your kids off your guidance at one point. So this is your role as a parent. Your role as a parent, as one of my mentors used to say, is when the kids hit the age of 18, they fire you as a mentor and they hire you as a consultant. So you're not a mentor anymore, they can come back to you and ask you questions whenever they feel the need to ask you questions. So that's one way of thinking about that. But you would want them to be weaned off gradually from you being like a hovering figure in their lives to being a consultant, where they actually would come back to you and ask you questions for guidance every now and then. So that's a healthy way of dynamic of the relationship. That being said, I think families have to be aware. I mean, let's not call it spying. Let's call it aware parenting. I need to know where you're hanging out, who you're hanging out with. That's not spying. That's just me being a cognizant parent. I would like to do that to the fullest and not spy. I would like to be aware, very aware, but not do any spying. Or minimal spying, if that's what you want to do. Other questions?
So the last one is conflict resolution. If nothing works, it doesn't matter how you do it. Nuh alayhi salam, when his son was not the way, it was not in the right path, correct? It could happen to any of us. It happened to a prophet alayhi salam. So what do we do about it? That's the question.
So, so the brother is asking, if there's a conflict in the family and nothing is working really, what do you do about that? Like, how do you address that? Well, we have to decide what that means. What does nothing mean? You know, when you say nothing worked, what does that mean? If you try that as a parent or as, you know, as a team, or have you consulted with a therapist? Have you went to family therapy? Have you involved people who are, you know, in the community to help you out? Have you mobilized all these resources? If not, we should do that, right? And often families feel that if I get a therapist involved, I'm kind of betraying my family. I'm kind of like getting an intruder, an outside person into my family, and that's a no-no. Well, that's actually healthy. If you involve somebody who's an expert, ask an expert. Ask somebody who can help you if you don't have enough expertise and knowledge. So that's something we have to do, right? If we are serious about reconciliation, about fixing things, we have to seek opinions of people who are experts in the field. But if despite of all these interventions, nothing really happens, you know, we have to make a lot of dua, and we have to be 100% sure that the hearts are in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that, like Surah Al-Kahf talks about the story of these people who had a righteous father. Because of this father's righteousness and dua, these two youngsters, you know, were brought back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of the righteousness of that father. So we become righteous, we try to stay steadfast, but most importantly, if you try everything, nothing works, you always have to keep the connection. You can't go to the estrangement phase that we talked about. You can't just estrange them from the family. The reason is they always have to have a place to run to. When life hits hard, and it will hit hard if they're away from the family, they always have to feel that, oh, I can run back to home. I can go back to mom and dad, they will accept me. They won't kick me out, they won't, you know, yell at me, scream at me. They'll open their arms for me to take me back. So that's really important. Other last questions?
يعني أذكر بحديث النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام لاعبه سبعا وأدبه سبعا وصاحبه سبعا ثم اترك له الحبل على ذلك.
No. So the brother is reminding us of the beautiful narration that talks about how you bring up your kids. And he says that for the first 7 years of play with them, and the second 7 years, what do? You do adab? Adib. So make sure that you teach them the best of manners and the best of character. And then the last 7, you become their friends. You be friends with them. And then, you know, the rest is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thank you so much for your nice attention.